Hi, this is Todd Duncan, and welcome to Insight Now, the monthly audio series brought to you by Prospect Mortgage, where you have a chance to learn from thought leaders and best-selling authors the success strategies that will both enhance your business and your life. This month, it's my pleasure to spend some time with Ron Kaufman. He is the author of an incredible book called Uplifting Service, The Proven Path to Delighting Your Customers, Colleagues, and Everyone Else You Meet. Sounds like a complete recipe for success. Hey, Ron, welcome to our interview. Thank you for being here.
It is a pleasure to be here with you, Todd.
So, listen, uplifting service, that certainly is a powerful adjective that we can all take a look at. You say something that is a massive hook at the very, very front end of the book, and that is that the world, not just any particular country, but the world is in a service crisis. What does that mean? Why do you say that?
Well, all of us can look around in the world that we live in and see several things going on. Number one is that great service is not always easy to find. You've got customers complaining about poor quality service, and today a customer with a complaint can go viral and have a bigger impact on you as a service provider than ever before. And you've got a lot of people who work in service, who are providing service to other people who just flat out don't like their jobs. They have resentment or cynicism, and so you've kind of got a crisis going on both sides. And the reason that this is so important and affects everybody is that the way the world is going, so many things are being commoditized with global competition or in industries like real estate or finance where so many people can offer the same thing that you offer. Service becomes the critical differentiator. But we're not taught in school how to do it, and only really the top performers in industries have mastered how. So the whole book, Uplifting Service, is designed to give people that proven path to deliver outstanding service, but also to uplift them as service providers so that you don't feel subservient or servile to somebody else when you're serving them, but actually you see it as the fundamental reason that human beings are all here.
And you can certainly tell a difference between people who are delivering great service because they want to, and obviously those that deliver whatever level of service they have to be because they're actually required to. And I think that the transformation of somebody's heart is a big part of how we respond to this crisis. What are you doing to, and you consult all over the world, and you have companies that are signing on to, this kind of notion of uplifting service. What are you recommending for people and, for organizations in terms or ways that they can respond to the crisis that you've just explained? Because I agree with you.
Well, the number one thing, Todd, is to get clear on what service really is. And it's something quite universal, but again, we're not really taught that in school, so let me go right down to the nub. Service is when someone takes action to create value for someone else. So service is taking action to create value for somebody else in life. And when you hear that definition, suddenly it makes a lot of sense, because if it's customer service, then you're doing something to take care of the customer. If it's internal service, for example, an assistant, a secretary, a colleague in one department helping somebody in another department, the action that they take is designed to create value for that other person. That is service as well. If you look in something like the industry that you're in, whether it is a real estate developer or you've got a broker or an agent or a bank or a mortgage lender, everybody's purpose is to take some action that someone else will appreciate, that someone else will value. So the definition of service, of taking that action to create value for someone else, requires us right away to ask ourselves the question, what is it that the other person will value about what it is that I'm about to do? So in your question, you asked me, what about people who are just following the script or doing what they're told or taking step-by-step procedure? The problem there is that they've become focused on the procedure rather than the purpose of the procedure. And the purpose for all of our steps in work is to do something that somebody else will appreciate and value.
I love that. I love it. And that's the transformation of heart. And, it's hard if you're a customer to reject an action that creates value. And it's impossible if you're a customer to reject an action that creates value if you can feel the heart behind it. And I think that this idea of following the script and not having heartfelt service, you can always tell an organization that's just walking through the process versus those that, that really care. And I get dumbfounded when I see people who are trying to walk through the script, as you call it, because it's almost worse than bad service. It almost creates this kind of, are you kidding me? But I'm in the business of teaching. You're in the business of teaching, and there are companies all over the world, and probably not even hundreds of millions, but probably billions of dollars are spent, in training, in customer service training, and I've watched it, and you've seen it, and you've been part of it. How come it's not working better than it should? What's the missing link? What can the listeners grab a hold of that can finally, change the course of their company trajectory and have the training work?
Yeah, this is a great question, Todd, and the fundamental problem is in that word training. So when you train someone, like, let's face it, you can train a dog.
Right.
You're telling somebody exactly what to do in a certain situation. And by the way, training is very important. That's why pilots are trained in a simulator. So if something occurs, their body will know exactly what to do. They'll go straight to the checklist. But in the service world in which we live, customers will always present situations, or customers will appear in a certain mood, with a certain requirement, with a certain concern, with a certain level of confusion. And if all you do is rely on what your people have been trained to do, then all they will have available to them is following a certain procedure or going step by step through a script. What's missing is what we call service education. Is teaching people to understand the fundamental principles of service, and then empowering and enabling folks to be able to apply those principles in certain situations. So, for example, if you have a child, do you want your child to only be trained when they go to school? Not at all. You want them to be educated so they can learn how to think about situations and then figure out for themselves what's the best thing to do as life presents them with one situation after another. Well, the same is true when we're serving someone else. We don't want to go into that service situation just thinking, I know exactly what to do before I even meet the customer. We want to educate people so they're empowered by understanding fundamental principles of service, which is what I write about in the book, so that when they go into a service situation, all of that understanding and education is in the background, and now I can be fully present to really genuinely listen, and as you say, with heart, care about the person that I'm serving, and then the right service actions will become much more natural.
So the education part, it seems to me, is the catalyst for ownership, where the training part, the how-to, may not totally get the person ingrained and motivated and owning the reason behind service. Is that correct?
Yes, and the problem's even worse, because if all you do with your staff or your team is give them training on service, the very first time they encounter a situation that wasn't covered in the training, they're going to escalate it again. It's going to go back to the supervisor, back to the manager, and the service provider is left saying, well, you didn't train me what to do. So rather than creating a group of people in your organization, even if it's a small business or a simple department, who are trained and will do what they've been told to do, we want to teach people about the fundamentals of service so they can decide for themselves and as a team what are the best service actions to uplift the person that you're serving. And that whole process of being educated, empowered, and enabled is also uplifting for the service provider.
And not to segue too far away from this, but something just hit me as I read the subtitle of the book again. This is a life skill. I mean, any relationship that is going to work between any two people who are committed to one another, whether it's a husband and wife, a father and a son, two best friends. I mean, it's the life skill is action that creates value for others, uplifts them, and you can't be defaulted in life, I would imagine, if you're committed to uplifting people, whether it's because it's a business situation and you want to delight the customer, or it's somebody you care about and you want to add value to their life. I think that just hit me hard. Is that true?
Todd, you absolutely nailed it. Every single one of us is living in an entire universe of service relationships in every direction. So the people at home, we're all in service to one another. What makes a family life successful? What makes a marriage successful? What makes somebody successful as a parent is taking some action that the other person appreciates and values. Even if you look at living within a neighborhood, or if you're living in an apartment building and the person next door, the smile in the morning, the appreciation of how somebody else maintains the lawn. You know, throughout our entire lives, service is everywhere we think. And, you know, that's why it's called being in the military service. That's why going to church is called a religious service. That's why it's called the government service. Service is constitutive of being alive and a human being in the world today.
I love it, love it, love it, love it. So good stuff. So I consult, you consult to a lot of companies, and I have,
yes,
a lot of organizations that are small, and then a lot that are large, and some that are in between. I'm sure the same is true for you. And I really want to kind of work around getting started. I don't specifically consult in the area of service, although it's a mainstream of several of my books. This book is an incredible owner's manual on creating, an uplifting service environment, culture, just a place to be, and I love it because of that. What do you, as you consult, recommend to people and organizations on how to get started? If everybody listening right now is, I would love to improve the level of service we deliver, what do you say? How do you get it going?
Okay, so Bill, you've mentioned a very important word there. There's one thing called improving service performance, which is giving somebody else greater value. And then there's something else, which is building a service culture. So they are absolutely related to each other, but they're not the same thing. So if someone is a service provider and wants to focus on taking the next step to improve service performance, give someone else a better service experience, which, by the way, is the fundamental differentiator between the highest performers in almost every industry and everybody else, is the people who can give someone else a better service experience. That's what causes customers to come back. That's what creates a positive personal reputation as a service provider. The number one step that person can do is to listen to understand what exactly is it that the other person that they're serving would really value, and to recognize that different people value different things, and even the same person could value something different at different moments in time. So, for example, sometimes all you really care about is speed. I just want to get that answer. I need to get off the phone. I got to move on. I've only got 30 minutes for lunch. At other times, the very same person could want education. Could you explain to me how that works? What are my options? How does the cook prepare that? What are the consequences of this clause inside the contract? There are other people, for example, at different times that may just want that personal attention, to take the time to connect with them and make them feel comfortable. So the number one first step for any service provider who wants to improve service performance is to pay more attention, ask better questions, and listen more carefully to what is it that the person that they're serving would really appreciate, want, and value. That's step number one. If you're an organization and you want to build an uplifting service culture where everybody in the organization is doing this not only for the organization's external customers, but is doing this internally for colleagues, then the number one first step is to begin the education process, where you're bringing the principles of fundamental service into the organization so that people can build what we call a common service language within the organization. All too often within companies, finance has one language, HR has another language, IT has another language, marketing, sales, everyone has their own functional language. So if you're responsible for building the culture, you want to build a common service language, and that's really what's talked about in the book.
I think this is going to be phenomenal as we work our way through this, because that is just spot on. And the architecture, you use these words that are kind of cool, just like you'd maybe go a little bit deeper on them. There's a proven, and you use architecture, and then you use the word for engineering a service culture. And one of the things that I've done a couple times is helped companies prepare for the J.D. Powers Award, and it's very exciting to see what has to happen to transform a company to deliver the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award years and years ago. I remember when GE got that, and somebody told me it cost $100,000 just to apply for that award. And but you're in the know on this stuff. What's the proven architecture for engineering a service culture? What do you mean by that in kind of short order?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to point out that a lot of times when people hear the word service, they think, oh, that's the soft part of business. So you can't really quantify, measure, or engineer it. And when we put the word culture after service, it gets even worse. They think you've gone, fuzzy off into the clouds. And what I'm saying is that that's absolutely not the case. If you look at the large organizations who have established stellar reputations for outstanding service, so Singapore Airlines, Ritz-Carlton Hotel, Nordstrom's Retailer, Zappos Online, Amazon.com, they have really approached the development of a service culture as a science. And what I've done by consulting with so many companies and so many places, so many industries around the world, is seeing what is that fundamental architecture that allows an organization to sequentially engineer the development of a service culture. And there are the following pieces. At the top, if you imagine like a house, the roof is really the leadership. It's the leadership of an organization declaring that service is a top priority. It's the leadership of the organization actually walking the talk, being a great role model for service. It's leadership of the organization talking the talk, knowing what that common service language is and using it in their writing, in their speaking every day. So there are 8 rules of service leadership, which are covered in one section of the book, and that's really the first part of the architecture. Think of it like the roof. Service education is the foundation. We spoke about that earlier, and you could think about that like a really solid, concrete foundation for a culture where everyone, no matter what their job is learning fundamental service principles and then learning how to apply those principles in their job. But between the foundation and the roof is what I refer to as the building blocks of service culture. And these building blocks consume the largest section of the book, and they're things like this. Recruiting the right people to join your organization, getting people who are not only technically proficient, but have that service heart and attitude, as you were pointing to. Having an orientation experience for new people who join your organization so they really get what this culture is about on their first few days, and they see how they can contribute to that. That's just 2 of the 12 building blocks. There are many others, like having the right kind of recognition and rewards for service providers, having a way of capturing the voice of the customer and bringing it inside the organization, benchmarking other organizations and bringing those learnings inside. Those building blocks form the fundamental architecture that in any organization you can use to engineer a stronger development of a service culture.
And I want to go a little bit deeper on some of these building blocks, but on the on the engineering piece is the final product of engineering an effective service culture that that people not only buy into why you're doing what you're doing, but they end up being solution oriented and focusing on really taking care beyond maybe the even expressed needs of a customer, added value, things they can do differently or things that they can do faster or things they can do that aren't even expected. Is that the outcome of this?
It's an entire culture where everyone is looking to step up to the next level. So the title, Uplifting Service, has a little play in there as well. When you used the word expected, think about it in the world today. Some organization, some service provider comes up with a new idea. Hey, we can offer this online. Or, oh, I'll bring this to your house. Or you can count on me to provide some new step up that's a higher level of service. It's really nice, and it stands out the first time. The second time, what was that new thing now becomes the nice thing. After a while, that nice action becomes normal. It becomes expected, and before you know it, it's no big deal. So one of the challenges in uplifting service is to constantly be looking for what is the next step up that a service provider or a service department or an entire organization can take, that in taking that next step up will cause the customer or the person being served to say, ooh, that's nice, that's new, that's better than before, I appreciate it. And that is the other part of uplifting service, always looking for what's the next step up to create more value. When everybody in an organization is thinking that way, it becomes a lot easier for the people who are facing the customer on the outside to be supported by people who are serving them on the inside so that the whole organization creates a better service experience.
Boy, man, that is huge. I remember 10 years ago or so, I was at Nordstrom, and there was a gal there. Her name was Mona, and she was clearly was the personification of the outcome of engineering a service culture. And just to your point, my wife and I were heading down to the Caribbean. It was Sunday afternoon after church. We were going down there on Monday morning, and I'm 6'5", nothing fits off the rack. And so I found a couple pairs of slacks, but they needed to be hemmed, before we could go down there. And she did everything she could and should, and talked to the tailoring department and asked me when I needed them, and I told her, today, and she gave the green light, and I thought, this is great. I'm going to come back later on and pick up my slacks. And she looked at me and she said, you know what, it sounds like you're going to be busy packing this afternoon. Why don't I bring your pants by your house this afternoon? And it was like, are you kidding me? And it was the first time I actually had an experience like that at Nordstrom, where it was just like, wow, over and beyond. And she gets there an hour early with the pants, which is like exceeding expectations. And then she asked me to try them on before she leaves, because if they don't fit, there's still time to get them right. And then she's talking to my wife while I'm trying them on, and as I learned later, Cheryl is now committed to going to Nordstrom and talking to Mona, and it was just like one thing after the other. And I walked her out my front door, and on the back of her car was a personalized license plate that said "Serve." And it was like, okay, not only is this the first time I've ever experienced it, but then to your point, what is she going to do next? Because now I just expect her to drop stuff off. What's she going to do next? And we got back a couple weeks later, and I get the mail, and there's a card from her. And the card says, Todd, I want to thank you for coming by Nordstrom a couple weeks ago, but I really needed to apologize to you because you asked me if the pants were going to go on sale, and I told you they weren't. Well, every July, Nordstrom has their half-year sale, and she said, your pants actually did go on sale. I've enclosed a credit to your Nordstrom account for the difference. And I'm going, are you kidding me? And then she put a P.S., looking forward to your next visit. It's just that kind of stuff which was on autopilot. It wasn't, she wasn't forced to do it. You could tell she wanted to do it. And no wonder she was in the top 10% of salespeople worldwide for Nordstrom.
And no wonder that Nordstrom has that kind of reputation. So a couple things about your story, which is fabulous. Number one, Nordstrom has this rule book. The first rule is use your common sense. The second rule is there will be no other rules.
Whoa.
So they've created a culture where they've educated people so profoundly in fundamental service principles and surrounded them with a culture of empowerment, enablement, leadership, and support that they know that Mona's going to go off into the world and do whatever Mona is called to do by virtue of her commitment to providing uplifting service to someone like you. Now, take a look at the consequence of that. Todd Duncan has just told 125,000 people that there is a phenomenal service experience waiting for you at an organization called Nordstrom. And the listeners can go in there with that sense of confidence and uplifted enthusiasm, and, they may hope to meet Mona, but even if they don't meet Mona, they know they're meeting Nordstrom. That's the power of building a culture of uplifting service.
You may or may not know the answer to this, but I'm sure you have some insight. What makes Tony Hsieh and what makes Zappos so powerful as a culture, service culture kind of model, if you will, or icon?
Right. Well, Tony is a great example of a leader who said the culture is the thing. And, he himself, when they created the company, was committed to building the culture. When the company was purchased by Amazon.com, one of his number one criteria was that we have to be able to maintain our culture the way it is, and they have done so. There's one particular story about what they do at Zappos that I think will be entertaining for your listeners, is that getting into Zappos as an employee, you're working in a warehouse, you're on a call center. Let's face it, it's not by itself a glamorous kind of job unless you infuse that job with a desire to provide outstanding and uplifting service. So in the orientation program for new people who actually are selected to work at Zappos, at a certain point during the program, they pause after a few days and say, we're really delighted that you've been here, but we know that some of you may realize now that this isn't the right place for you to work, and that's okay. In fact, we'd like to give you some cash if you will leave now. and it started out at 100. They raised it to 200, to 500, to 1,000. I believe right now it's at $2,000 hard cash. They will put in your hand for you to say, it's been a great experience, but I'm going to go look for a job somewhere else and walk out the door. Now, what the heck are they doing? Trying to pay people to leave? What they're committed to is making sure that each person who says, no, you know what, I know I could take the money, but I want the job, I want to be part of an organization that has a culture so that I know that every other person I work with was made that same offer, and every one of us said, hey, you keep the money. I want to be part of this team. I want to be part of this culture.
Which I think is one of the, in human performance is one of the great motivators, feeling that you're a meaningful part of an exciting team. I think for a lot of people, and maybe even the majority, that gives you a sense of fulfillment and a sense of, just a sense of achievement and accomplishment, unlike just the cash, and that's probably why that happens.
Todd, excuse me for interrupting here, but I just got to piggyback on your point. So that's what all of us are doing here.
Yeah.
What you just said about being part of a team or being part of a community of people who are committed to service, I think that's what all of us are doing here on Earth. We're all here to serve each other.
Powerful. No, you're absolutely right. And the world goes around much easier if we have that commitment. I heard something, too, and I just want to echo this because our time together is so meaningful, and the culture part of it, real-world examples are a great way to demonstrate culture. But a friend of mine was telling me that he was at a conference recently that Tony Hsieh was speaking at, and he was talking about their 24/7 culture. He was talking about that everybody had been, educated and developed, and that they own the idea that no matter what a customer's inquiry are, and we've all kind of heard these stories, we're here to help. We're here to help. And apparently there were some either reporters or writers there, and one of them wanted to test Tony's comments about the service culture at Zappos. And so in front of the audience, this guy actually called and, got a Zappos gal on a call center and said he was in Chicago for a conference and, that he had heard that, Zappos can help their customers, with any need, and he wanted to know the best pizza place in town. And the gal responded by saying, Zappos sells shoes, but we also want to help any customer, with their goals if we can. And she said, do you mind holding for a second? The guy said no. And she said, before I put you on hold, tell me what area you're at or what hotel you're at or whatever. She started narrowing things down and got on Google and Yelp and found the top 3 rated pizza places. And the guy, I guess, was just, you can imagine being blown away that we sell shoes. Somebody calls, wants to know the best pizza place in Chicago, and the gal actually helped him find one.
Yeah, 100%. And incidentally, one of the building blocks in building and architecture is called service measures and metrics. And Zappos, even though that girl was on the call center, they don't even keep track of how much time she spent on the call. Because somewhere they got the record, but the metric is, was the caller delighted with the experience of being on the call?
Right.
So he didn't call for shoes this time. But again, you've got an incredible advocate, an ambassador out there in the world spreading positive word of mouth, and that's a critical component of customer loyalty. Anyone in business knows that loyal customers who keep coming back, who recommend other people, who speak positively about you, that's the lifeblood of a successful business. And you've just identified the key way to earn that lifeblood, which is to take care of the people that you're serving, not just follow the procedure and go to work and say, I'm doing my job.
No, it's phenomenal. Let's segue. This is really it's not only a fun interview, but I think it's timely. I think you're right. When we say that the world is in a service crisis, and I think America is in a service crisis. I think we are watching just at almost every level with companies and with our government and with each other and with a oppressed economy and all the challenges we're having. It's hard to develop a spirit around serving, and yet it's the most important thing to do in any time, but especially in difficult and tough times because people have options. And one of the things that I get excited about, especially in the real estate and banking and mortgage industry, is there's been so much regulation over the last couple of years and so much of a refinement in actual products that are available and to the point where a lot of providers of loans are somewhat commoditized. We have pretty much the same menu and the same different kind of, product opportunity and fairly similar in costs of obtaining those, the products or loans. And yet, service has always been a great differentiator. And in tough times, I don't know if you have a comment on this, but I'd like to ask, how much more important is this whole concept when you're in difficult markets or in non-differentiated markets? How important is this service commitment?
Well, then it becomes the fundamental differentiator. We've seen this happening all over the world as so much manufacturing has gone off to China, for example, where products become commoditized and price competition is incredibly fierce. Then how do we differentiate one from another, one service provider from another? How do you stand out from the crowd? How do you cause people to speak about you in a positive way? And you used the word options. You said we have a choice. And I think the fundamental choice that every service provider needs to make is the choice between their own sense of cynicism, resignation, why should I bother, what's in it for me, sadness almost, or making the fundamental choice to say, you know what, I'm going to be upbeat about this. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to be ambitious. And then the step that you take out of that commitment to ambition is, what can I do for someone else? If you're ever feeling in a funk or you're not feeling good or you don't feel motivated, the way to get out of that, and I'm speaking to the whole nation now, is to say, let me stop focusing on me. Let me stop focusing on, my lot in life or my state of affairs, and instead look outwards and say, okay, what can I do that will make someone else happier? What can I do that will make somebody else's day? What can I do that would add value to anybody else? It could be the person sitting next to me. Let me leave a nice note on their desk. Let me send them a positive email. Let me fire off a quick text message to my wife to tell her just that I appreciate her. In that moment of giving, in that moment of committing ourselves to doing something positive for someone else, that's the moment we stop thinking about ourselves in a negative way, and suddenly as we uplift someone else, the positive spirit comes right through you. The energy of uplifting comes through the service provider, and we're on our road back again to success. Yeah. So when we look at America and the world today, I really think that is the fundamental step that we need to take, which is to say, let's stop focusing on how bad things are and say, great, what is it I can do to help take care of my neighbor, my colleague, my customer, someone else in my industry, the new person who just moved in next door, the new kid who just showed up in the office? What can I do to take care of someone else? And in doing so, the good spirit, the good energy comes right up through you.
Yeah, it's massive, absolutely massive. Great. You I think you rattled off about 6 of the building blocks of service culture. And without going deep, we talked about recruiting orientation, recognition, capturing the voice of the customer, benchmarking, and metrics. Fill in the blank on the other 4 or 5 just quickly so everybody can get a sense of them. And then obviously we would love to have everybody have a copy of this book, and so they can go deep on it, because that's the middle, as you said, between the roof and the foundation, the middle part of the book, which is where all the meat is. What are some of the other blocks just quickly that we could talk about?
Great, Todd. So the 12 building blocks of service culture start with building a common service language, and that's what the education provides. The second is called an engaging service vision. Now, some people call it a mission or a credo or principles. I don't really care what you call it. What I care is that it is engaging, that it's something that people say, I want to be part of that. The third is recruitment, getting the right people, and the fourth is the orientation experience. After that is what we call service communications. What's in your newsletter? What's on your screensaver? What's on the walls where you work? What's the first thing you talk about in the meeting? What's in your signature file? The opportunities that you have to communicate and keep in front of people the service message is service communications. Following that is recognition and rewards, which we touched on. Capturing voice of the customer is next, and that's the actual anecdotal verbatim. It's the subjective, qualitative mood and language that people use. And that's important that everyone in the organization hear what the customer is saying. The next building block is called measures and metrics. So that's really keeping your eye on the ball of not only how are we performing, but specifically what is it that the customers say that we could do that would add more value to them in the future. The next building block is called a service improvement process, What's the process in the organization that ensures that service will continuously improve? It could be a suggestion program. It could be a contest. It could be a series of workouts or cross-functional teams, but some process that ongoingly causes the company to look at the data, look at the company's voice of the customer, and see where can we improve. Service recovery and guarantees comes next. What do you do when things go wrong? What's the institutionalized freedom that people have so that when there's an oops, they can turn it into an opportunity, like Mona did by writing to you and saying, listen, I don't want you coming into Nordstrom's and realizing that those slacks could have been on sale, and then she proactively even avoided a problem by reaching out to you. So service recovery and guarantees, and then the last two building blocks are service benchmarking, looking out around you, and then finally it's role modeling. And people sometimes ask me, why is role modeling last? I would think that that should come first. And the reason I put role modeling as the final building block is this. If you're working on everything else to build a culture, but your personal actions or your personal voice are not in alignment with that, you're rude to somebody, you snap at someone, you write something that's nasty and other people see it, they're not going to believe all the other actions that you're taking. By the same token, you may be working on building a company or building a department that has strong service, and you're not perfect on everything yet. It's a work in process. But your personal role modeling is committed. People can look at you and listen to you and say, wow, that guy really gets it. Then they will line up to support you and charge over that hill to uplift the service to all of the people that you work with.
I am inspired by these, and I think back to just being in the business of writing and and teaching and educating for 20 years, and I think of all the books that have been written on customer service, and I have a sense right now on how this book is different. But what is your sense? You obviously are the author of a phenomenally enriching, empowering, adjective-based title, uplifting service. It's not just about service, but how is it different in your mind? I mean, you obviously wrote a book to differentiate how to provide this kind of service. What in your mind makes it so uniquely different?
Well, I've worked with different organizations all over the world for 20 years. And so whether it was working with Singapore Airlines or it's working with Disney or working with different companies, I've not looked at what is their story, like, what's Zappos with the pizza or what's Nordstrom with the slacks. But I've looked underneath that to say what fundamentally are all of these outstanding service providers doing? What's the architecture? How can someone else then take a look at that and say, okay, I get it, but I'm not in that industry. I'm in the real estate industry. I'm not in the retail industry. Or I'm in the banking industry. I'm not in the enterprise building of IT and telecommunications. How can I apply what it is that they're doing right here where I work, in my next call, in my next day on the job, in the department that I'm responsible for? So what this book has done is it's really teased out, if you will, the complete architecture of how to build an uplifting service culture. Presented it with stories that make it easy for people to understand, drilled it down to say, here are the principles, these are the key learning points, and most importantly, here's exactly what you can do to apply these learning points in your situation. Whether you're an internal service provider, whether you're a volunteer in a service organization, whether you're the leader or the frontliner within a company, whether you're somebody listening to this who doesn't even work in a commercial situation, what action can you take to improve and step up and create greater value for somebody else? And all of that is what's laid out in the book, which is why it's called The Proven Path to Delighting Your Customers, your colleagues, and everyone else you meet with uplifting service.
Very, very powerful. We've got a few minutes left, and I would love for you if you could just kind of rewind the tapes of 20 years of teaching and educating and developing and architecting, service solutions for companies you consult with. What are maybe one or two of the most powerful or maybe painful lessons that you've watched companies actually go through in a transition from a non-committed service culture to a uplifting service culture? What are one or two of the top lessons?
Well, I'm going to speak to the pain on this one because as we were speaking about earlier, I think everyone in America right now has a choice. And we have seen industries and companies fail when they've focused on only trying to make a better product, or only trying to compete based on price, or saying that, we know better. And the moment that an organization or an individual takes its eye off, who am I doing this for? What do they appreciate? What do they want? What do they value? Then you can actually end up focusing on the wrong thing and find yourself going out of business. By contrast, what we're seeing is other organizations, and it's happening today in a very dynamic way with the speed of change and with things going onto the web and consumers being able to see what their options are. Ultimately, people will choose based on where do they feel understood, where do they feel listened to, where do they feel valued and appreciated. And so that's the flip side of giving uplifting service. Creating value for someone else is making sure that those people that you're serving feel valued. And you're listening to this and you've got a marriage, for example. You want to make a better marriage? Make sure the person you're married to feels valued. You've got kids, go home and make sure that they know that you value and you love them. This applies in every part of our lives, Todd.
Awesome. So I want to thank you for what is, in my mind, probably one of the most empowering, impactful interviews that I've ever done. And we know that this can change the course of any company whose leaders are committed to taking your advice and in creating an uplifting service culture. For all of you who are listening, it's our desire to bring to you these truths every single month so that, whether it's service or influence or marketing or social media or whatever, that you can see a difference in your organization. You can take it to the next level. And so make sure that you bookmark Ron's website, which is upliftingservice.com. Make sure that you follow him in his social media circles. Make sure if you're a leader that you get this book for everybody that's on your team, because I have to tell you something, in my 20 years of being a teacher and educator, it's the most powerful book on service I've ever seen. So, Ron, I thank you for your time. It's been an amazing 45 minutes, and you have written a book that I think is transformational, and it's my hope that not only thousands of companies but millions of customers are impacted by just the message, which applies to business and life, uplifting service, the proven path to delighting your customers, colleagues, and everyone else you meet. It's powerful.
Todd, I thank you, Todd, and your listeners for your commitment to building a world where everyone is educated and inspired to excel in serving one another. That's what we're doing here on Earth, and thanks for making this a better place.
Yeah, makes the world go around. So thanks, everybody, for listening to this month's edition of Insight Now. We'll be back with you next month when we showcase another best-selling author